we're at the point where, and this is continuing to bridge the value of business process and technology, is AI enablement for business, because you now have a tool that can, in instances, effectively logic through a problem with you or without a human in the chain. And so then that has continued to be very interesting.
Welcome to Engineer in the Loop, where we have hands-on conversations at the human-AI handoff, code, tools, and war stories for builders in the loop. This episode is brought to you by From Code to Clarity. Let's unlock clarity on what truly drives you beyond the keyboard. Join your fellow engineers of the Clarity Bites as we explore strategies to go from the code to find your clarity. During your free discovery chat with Clark, mention this podcast to get over 50% off your first session. Again, mention Engineer in the Loop for over 50% off your first paid session after your free discovery call. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newly rebranded podcast, Engineer in the Loop, a weekly show for software engineers who ship with models in the mix. We have a special guest today, Peter, who is the CEO and partner at Facet, who leads their AI engagements. How's it going, Peter?
Great, Alec. Thank you for having me. And Brian, great to meet you as well. I look forward to having a conversation with you guys. This is going to be hopefully fun and exciting.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. If you want to give us a little bit of background, maybe how did you get into technology and, what?
Yeah, absolutely. So my processor age, I was a P2, Pentium 2 kid. I started in the back of back in the 90s, it was Micro-H Computers was a distributor of PCs, and you had different franchises across the US, and my parents had one of those locations in Southern California. So I spent most of my time in the back of their warehouse, playing with 14-inch floppies or playing with everything else that they had. They let me break everything, rebuild it with whatever parts they had sitting around. So that was my start. And realistically, my first PC was a quote-unquote IBM laptop that weighed probably more than I did as a kid. Plopping that thing on the table and trying to play whatever games or like word processing, anything that was on that system that was my first intro to really having a PC at home. From there, it was trying to find a way to put it directly. Like, how do you make money from working with computers and having that as a hobby and extending it past that? And it came to all through like high school and college of trying to avoid doing the thing that I really liked as work, but also finding other ways to drive toward a career. And then I ended up in business school, and then came out the other side realizing that there's an absolute market in the middle for technology bridged, married to business process. And so that's, going down the track of analytics, MarTech, everything else that was integrated there. That really became, I think, the impetus. And it feels like the whole industry has gone this way. Like, we started out with MarTech and trying to measure KPIs, measure other actionable metrics. And we started out with what was available from Google or whatever other services were around at that point. It seemed to be just Google Analytics was the big player, and their ad platforms, Facebook ads, ad platform coming online. And then we started to get automation tools. And at first it was Zapier was the first big splash on the market. You had some open source projects that were running around. And so that building into I think everybody's exposure to AI and taking it the next step above your automation workflows of, you can go one end of the spectrum and write Python to do your thing, and you got AWS Lambda, and you could do stuff in the cloud. And now we're at the point where, and this is continuing to bridge the value of business process and technology, is AI enablement for business, because you now have a tool that can, in instances, effectively logic through a problem with you or without a human in the chain. And so then that has continued to be very interesting, because I think as a person who has grown up in the tech industry for such a long time, majority of my life at least, it's always been this question of everybody has these really great ideas, and some people are good at certain things. So you have your front-end developer who's great at making things look pretty. You have back-end developer who's great at making things fast and scalable. But there was never a way for some of those individuals or people like myself to iterate through ideas quickly and build on a concept, and then really finalize that execution, and to satisfy the creative itch of being able to build an entire project or at least scaffold a whole project. And now that's absolutely on the table. And I think that's the most exciting piece in all of this is, having come all the way through, we're hitting a level where we kind of have a promise of, from inception to true vision on the other side. You can see where you can see your touches on a project and all of those other things. And it just makes it that's been the biggest, most interesting jump into AI. Finally, after the all of the work in what I would consider more traditional like IT.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I was actually just at a user group last night where they had a business person who's more like, I think he said tech adjacent, right? He's more of the customer rep guy, but he was able to use Claude 4.0 Sonnet to basically say, hey, I want to build a system from scratch that basically tells me where all my consultants are, what kind of engagements they're on, all that sort of stuff, and had like 12 different iterations of this thing. Some of them didn't work, so he just threw them away, but eventually got to the point. Sonnet 4.0 was the best one, but could basically build a Blazor app from scratch. He has no idea how to run it, right? It just keeps hitting him with the continue button, continue button, continue button. It works. Hey, now I want to add this button. Now I want to add this other thing. I want to push this to Git now because I know that's a thing I need to do maybe. And like all these things that it was super interesting because he had a responsive web app knowing zero about .NET, knowing zero about Blazor, and it looked pretty all right. Somebody could come in and clean it up, but for an internal web app, like I think it's just going to empower people to do what they need to do without having to wait for the your internal dev team's queue to get to you.
You have to deal with the whole, well, who put this in the budget, right? At this point,
Right.
Because like we didn't have time to write this.
Yeah, no. What's been that side, Brian, of like the how do you communicate and like let's say like 90% of the projects that we do, you don't know realistically what the total cost of that project is going to be. You can provide an estimate, and we all try to, but as you're going through and stepping through, if it's like a net new line of business application, how do you say like, yes, this is going to take me exactly like 40 hours. This is going to take me 120 hours. Like you t-shirt size, you do what you can, and you get better over time. But with new technology, new process, there's always that wiggle room with your high lows. And when you have the ability to just scaffold your thing and say like, hey, this is 80% of what I want it to be. No, it's not connected to a database, but it like the UI elements kind of do most of what I need them to do. You can hand that off to your team, and they're like, oh yeah, we now completely understand your vision and workflow. Okay, great. We can take it from here and we can finish the project. And here's a much more accurate, like high resolution estimate.
Yeah.
Well, and even with that, like they had it auto-magically connected to like SQLite to keep, it did an in-memory one at one point. It did like a real one, but to your point, like I know what needs to be there. I have my database models already created. Like you could more or less just package it up and be like, okay, how do we get this to a more maintainable state? And I would argue it's even better than Shadow IT building some of these customizable, like I was at a previous client before where they had a guy who built a Power Automate app with Power Apps, and 8-ish people at the company were using it. That guy got a new job and left, kept running for 6 to 12 months, and then eventually it broke. And they came to IT and said, hey, this is an application that we use every day. IT needs to fix it. And IT's like, where did this come from? We don't build Power Apps here. Like, what's going on? Like, we don't want to maintain this. To your point, Brian, who put this in the budget?
Right.
Who put this in our timeline? And you have people who are like, I don't know, just fix it. It's part of my job. I would argue building code from scratch is a lot easier to maintain, especially when we start talking about like Copilot instruction files, some of that kind of stuff. It feels like it's an easier thing to maintain, and the end user can mostly fix it themselves. Like, hey, go, you got a 404, cool, tell AI that you got a 404 and see if it fixes it.
Yeah. So I've kind of had the opposite experience where you guys are talking about, starting from from nothing and getting, this really awesome app in like a few hours, right? In my experience, granted, I'm the boomer in the room, so limited here experience, but I'm much better off like using, whatever the tool of choice is to generate, giving it like a structure ahead of time and saying, this is kind of the structure, go fill in the blanks, rather than having to like vibe code from the start and be like, okay, let's make a page that shows all the students in my class, right? Okay, great. But I'm much better off saying, okay, this is the student model I want you to use. Like, these are the properties, go build the page, right? Rather than trying to start from scratch. Otherwise, it's just always, because for my biggest drawback is like AI is really good at stuff it knows, but even like stuff it knows that it should know, it doesn't know. Like if I say I want a student model, it might think, well, that means they need a first name, a last name, a student ID. And it won't even think to say, hey, did you want to have like a list of courses that they're in or anything like that? Like, it doesn't think for you. So, yeah.
Well, so what's interesting about that, I agree with you, Brian. full stop on that. Way that the directive internally for my team, the way that we approach it is AI is only as good as the information that you feed it up front. And so the brief is exceptional. Like the prompt engineering is exceptionally important. And the way we've had customers come to us and they say, hey, why is this not 100% accurate immediately? Like, why are we not getting the expected result immediately? I said, okay, how many new employees did you just hire, right? How many junior level employees did you just hire? Like, oh, we just brought in, 3 to 5, new juniors. I said, great. Are they doing exactly what you expected them to do day one? And, the answer is almost always, oh no, like we put them through training. We do, these other things. Okay. So in the analogy that we've been using is just treat them like you would any other employee. It's just that they are, they don't get hungry. I mean, I guess they eat electricity, but they don't get hungry, they don't get tired. You're really limited by your budget and how many tokens you want to purchase and just your whoever's helping you with prompt engineering. But the goal is you have to build that knowledge base over time. And it's the same thing we've run into, again, to your point, Brian, is this, right? It's the same thing that I would tell a junior from time to time. You're like, right. I know that you know this. Go back and think about it.
Right. It's the same experience. It's like, okay, I need a button on the page and it needs to be blue and it needs to say start. And they come back and they're like, well, I thought maybe you wanted a green button that says continue or something. It's like, no. And it feels like you go the same exact experience you get with the junior. It's like it does 3 things that you don't want it to do, and one thing that you try to do, it doesn't do it right.
Right.
So that's a really interesting analogy.
Yeah. It's the way that honestly, it's the way that if you think about it that way, and I hate to frame it this way, but like injecting a little humanity into the process of working with AI, the level of understanding there for most people makes more sense. Like it seems to be, they're like, oh, this works for us now that I understand that this is the way that I have to do it. It's like, yeah, it's going to be a process like any other system. You're going to build up more training information for your employees. They're going to skill up. And at the same time, if you want an employee that's going to walk into your business and it's going to be, executive leadership or middle management, you're paying for that person's salary at that tier, at that role. So that means that the project needs to consume that, whatever information that you would give a middle, manager who understands your business, your applications, your workflows. Let's get all of that information while we're building this. And then we have to go basically train it. You have to go through that process and give it very quickly, 10 years of experience in your application. So that seems to turn heads and seems to be a great way for people to resonate. And it's been, it helps us sell larger projects because, we want it to be at that level to start. Okay. So we're willing to spend, X dollars more to increase the training set or, run our own custom local LLM, and we want to train it only on our data, those kinds of things.
I think that's a good point that I never thought of explaining it that way, because there's always a lot of the companies I talk to are like, we want AI, we want to do all this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going, we typically start with a RAG architecture just because it's like, hey, if you want the quickest, to see, go to market, see if it's ROI, and we can iterate from there, let's pick a very small subset, let's get it in the LLM, and let's see how you even feel working with an LLM. To your point, it's a skill and muscle you have to develop, and when people first start, everybody's bad at it. Like with any skill, right? Some people might be naturally a little bit better, but your results kind of suck, your responses kind of suck because you don't know how to guide the LLM to get you what you actually want. You're used to typing into Google and somebody saying something similar to you enough that result's high enough and the click traffic is high enough to then put that to the top, whereas an LLM doesn't have that. It's like, well, here's kind of what I think you want, and if you ground it on your own data, it might be connecting extra dots too that may or may not exist. Maybe it's connecting dots that you didn't intend for it to, but totally make logical sense. All of these different things that you have to get used to working with AI and LLMs, that I think is a good way to do that, is just however you can get into people's hands early. And then also talk the same way of hey, here's the small little nugget we gave AI to help with your company. To your point, a middle management, an executive coach, all that, they get a lot more of that data. Do you want to give it to an LLM? Do you want to, talk about data security, data segregation? What's the persona of the person using this AI? Can everybody get all that information? And I think then it's just kind of a rabbit hole from there of, some people want to use AI for the sake of AI, and you need to figure out what is the actual problem you're trying to solve. Because to your point, why would I train an LLM to be a mid-level manager if I really need a IC developer? Those don't mesh. They don't make sense.
Well, so one of the interesting things, because we use a lot of N8N for our agentic workflow stuff, just because of the maintainability is fantastic. One of the things that I was speaking with another firm that does a lot of N8N builds, and what was so they are building workflows that are, they're using them for different hospitality chains and things like that, and they're building them on the back of N8N, which is very cool. But they showed me their workflow, and to like where Brian's talking about, like you have to force it back into the right mindset. They built in checks across this workflow. And it's the best way I could frame it is it's almost like a school teacher, right, with a ruler, like getting ready to wrap the AI agent on its knuckles, going like, no, I want it this way. Like, please get, this is the format I expect. And there are multiple points where it's constantly checking for, do you have the right tone? Okay, this tone isn't correct. Please think about it again, right? And that keeps, coming through. It's the same way that like a parent, it's almost like a parenting relationship. You walk through like, hey, that's not the way that we talk to, guests. That's not the way that we talk to these kinds of people. Like, no, you have the information wrong. Like, why don't you try that again? And it's this, I'm not helicopter parenting, but realistically, it's just forcibly engineering the AI to a result that you want, but it takes a lot more work than just the training is one thing, but it's going to come down to the model that you're using and everything else, and still having the controls on the other side for that output. I thought that was incredibly interesting, that it wasn't just, hey, I have a team of agents that are actively regulating each other, which works fairly well, but then also whatever the outputs from those agents, there's almost subroutines that are just further like aligning the responses and feedback between the agents themselves.
That's super interesting to just kind of like hold each other accountable and try to catch. I know, Brian, you just put out a sessionized session on your sessionized page, but like just how do you not end up like the companies that Cursor, I think, was the latest example that caused a bunch of people to unsubscribe because they had an AI agent that had a name that basically told somebody, hey, this thing you're trying to do is against the terms of service, which it wasn't, because there wasn't enough validation before the AI model talks straight to the person. Right. You have the no givesies backsies car, you have Air Canada. If we don't validate outputs, potentially you could be talking to a customer and give them false information. So it's kind of cool to see the red teaming starting to happen, potentially, of other people's stuff of like, hey, let's maybe intercept this or go retry it, or maybe we push back on the AI models from another AI model before it goes to the customer. That way it can regenerate and basically think deeper of like, did you just say something outrageous, or is this something you're really confident in? Because AI models will always sound confident.
But they're always right.
Well, yeah. Even if you tell them they're wrong, they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Here's the right answer now. Yep. And it can still be wrong.
What was it? Kevin tweeted yesterday something like, I see the issue here. I want this on a T-shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole process and what was going, the other side of that coin, though, the active concern that I have about moderation of agents, where it's not the user that's moderating the output, like direct to the human, is that you are also getting a corporate filter attached to whatever the AI agent is producing for you. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other concern, is that there are a number of companies that are doing this, that are providing the ability to interact with an agent, but a lot of it is just backdoored to OpenAI. Like they're all wrappers for OpenAI, or whether it's in Microsoft's cloud, or you're using OpenAI's infrastructure, or any of the other number of models, like if you're using Google, whoever else you're using. Mm-hmm. Right. They're still, the question that I have still at some point, and I feel like we're going to find out in the next probably 6 to 8 months, it feels like someone's going to say something, is that there's these additional layers. Like OpenAI even came out because that's the agent, the personality that got injected into the agent was abrasive, and I can't remember what exactly it was saying, but they had to go back. They rolled back the release and had to work on the tone of the agent. And it's just, well, at some point, what if I want an unfiltered, the ability to access any information I want? Why do they get to govern that information that I'm able to access? Because on the internet, you do have some level of that, but typically, for the most part, if you are looking for something specific, you can find it. You just have to go look in the right place. And if the web is going to go the way of just pull up OpenAI and I'm going to search OpenAI and take what I see as truth, then do you end up with an entire group of people, entire generations of people that are just, I'm going to make a little tweak here in the back end, and I'm going to get more people to buy Tide detergent because we say Tide is 10% better, or whatever it happens to be.
Right. Now you can sell ad space into your LLM injections.
Yep, exactly.
Like, hey, if you give me $15,000, I'll make sure that more of my responses point to you. Mm-hmm. Interesting. The other thing that you're ringing a bell in my head right now is on just general censorship. So like I had the same kind of question. Like if I put my stuff into Azure OpenAI, well, Microsoft has some ethical concerns and their statements about ethical AI that maybe I don't want to limit my model, right? Maybe I want my model for my people to be able to swear at them or whatever thing that isn't right. Obviously, we don't want bigotry. We don't want stuff like that. But you know what I mean? Like there could be concerns with like you're saying the corporation that ultimately holds the keys to the lockbox can say, nope, you can't do that. And all of a sudden the thing you need is turned off because they deemed it unethical or, well, you know, let's just look at politics as an example. I hate to talk politics, but the dichotomy between the two camps right now, if one of those camps controls the AI, could change everything.
We've already seen that depending on, you know, people from both camps are leveraging the platforms they already have, right? So that's already being done in account access is being suspended, revoked, changed.
Right.
You know, so, you know, how do you do that? Especially like for, you know, more to even to your point, Brian, how do you do it for a nonprofit that's heavily, you know, they're heavily invested in a specific message and someone disagrees with that message and they turn off access to this tool that was helping them write copy or QA things or provide frontline worker responses, whatever it happens to be. And it's concerning because I think that there's a lack of understanding, I think, from current leadership, at least in the United States, about AI and what it means for the general population and what the implications are. And so, you know, some people have called it like the next industrial revolution. But the question is still, while we're riding the crest of the wave, where does everybody else go? And how does that impact them? How do these changes impact them? Because we still know where to go. A lot of us still know where to go to find the things that we're looking for. We're not reliant on AI in order to go through our daily life. But we're going to get to that point, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years where I think they've already talked about your AI assistant's going to be able to make purchases for you. So it's going to likely prefer certain places that have more money, that are able to integrate. Brian, to your point, that pay for placement. You know, hey, I want FTD like partnered florists to be the one that I always go with because, you know, on Mother's Day, they're going to be sending out these things like, yeah, can you just take care of this for me? Right. Okay. So you put out a bunch of independent florists out of business because they are not ponying up for whatever franchise fees.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because isn't that the whole point of capitalism though, is to be able to leverage that? And I get what you're saying about the small players, but if AI is as accessible and easy to use as some would claim, shouldn't they be just as easily able to make their own?
I don't know, what do we qualify as make our own? Like, because I think DeepSeek they claimed like a $50 million investment to get their model up versus what Facebook and X and Google and Microsoft and OpenAI have done to get their models off the ground. I mean, it's a question of what is the relative ease in which you do this? Because I could tell you right now, like right in the state of California, to run a dedicated GPU for training a model, like just the electricity alone, even if you're running something like a 20 series card or a 30 series card, you're still paying potentially hundreds of dollars a month to run that training and building your model and doing everything else, let alone the cost of the education and time investment to do that. And so I think that's a yes, absolutely. Like, you know, the free hand of the market or the hand of the free market. At some point, we all have to recognize that there's hands on the scales at many points. You know, the scales are weighted in certain ways. And I think Saudi Arabia has figured it out because they're going to build this huge AI compound, like server farm, training farm out in the desert in their country. Like they're going to build a bunch of infrastructure out there, and AI, I can't remember if it was OpenAI, just had like acknowledged or signed a deal with them already. But I know that they're giving every citizen of Saudi Arabia free access to OpenAI, you know? So I see the power there. It's just a matter of...
I mean, I think that's kind of the risk we have whenever there's only a handful of vendors too, right? Like prime example, let's say Microsoft. Say I want to sue Microsoft. Microsoft could very easily interject in there or put bad case law of whenever anybody's talking about suing a corporation that they have interest in, like they could do that. And it could be built in and so deeply ingrained in the core training of the model that it doesn't matter. You know, the accessibility might be there. You might be able to access the model. You could fine tune on it, but trying to undo the neural networks at that deep of a level, like they could ingrain it so deep that like you're not going to be able to do that. And it's kind of the same with your purchasing too, right? Like, hey, this chain is always going to get preference. Maybe your model tells you to go drive 3 hours to go buy flowers when you're in a major metropolitan city because that chain doesn't exist there, but it's just so heavily ingrained that this really weird edge case just always does this one thing, and it's so benign to the vast majority of people that unless you start calling it out and pointing it out, like people just aren't going to notice.
Well, and then you shift the work, right? This is the other thing that's going to be very interesting, right? It's like prove that you're human and select all of the traffic lights that are in this image, and it's just us training for free people's other systems. We're going to get to the point where we're providing feedback to the AI. Was this the result you expected? No, I didn't expect this result because of X, Y, and Z, right? You're now closing the feedback loop on QA and providing them, what is effectively free QA. They're also training their model, especially if you're not paying for any of these services where you can opt out of them training on your data. You're also training their model for free. And at some point, this is going to become absolutely commercially viable. From an advertising perspective, the cost of maintaining and managing these is going to get much less expensive. And we're going to see this, in the same way that Google has monopoly on search for the most part. I think they're, over 90%, and now it's actually shifted down because it seems like people are using OpenAI or other AI models to actually query and garner search results and things like that. There is going to be this we're the product, unfortunately. Like the product is the commoditization of human intelligence and human ability, critical thinking, and we've now put it into what is this box that everybody can go access. Education is having a heck of a time right now with all of the different pieces of regulating this. I've seen a bunch of articles where they're going back to blue books, pen and paper. It's a matter of, and I'll frame it this way, it really feels like the utilization of AI and the prevalence of AI in the education space, the government space, and the just public interest space in general, like the concern is that we shift critical thinking away from people and we shift it into the hands of companies that are paid a lot of money to maintain these systems. And so it becomes the question of, is there a truly public model that has the public interest at heart that's, I could say paid for by the government, but let's be real, it's still going to have influence. So how do you get to a place where you can truly have a system that it isn't biased in that way, aside from just injecting it with certain information and it having, preferred pathways? It's just a matter of what do you do at that point, or do we all just accept that this is the way that it's going to be going forward?
It's super interesting just because like you bring up bias, like even if you just look at culturally, right? Like different cultures have different biases that like totally cool. Some would just be like bizarre in different cultures. Like I think different countries have extended families staying in one roof, for example. So like that might be normal. There might be tax implications for that in those countries. And then you have other countries like the US, like tipping is a big one. That like, hey, what should I do when I pay my bill? And it wouldn't be weird for the LLM to be like, hey, make sure you tip. But in other countries, it'd be like, why would I pay you more money for the food that I'm already paying for? Like, there's all these weirdness and edge cases that like you can try to train those out. But again, I think once you start getting really digging down into stuff, we'll see more and more of these examples that because it's just hard to train out some of these biases of, if I scan enough receipts and they have a tip field, I'm going to assume that means something, especially if people are filling it out. Like you're just going to get some of that bias that comes along with the data, even if you then try to reverse engineer it back out. Like you're only going to be so successful. And at some point, do you even care? Like some of these companies, do you even care to remove some of the bias? Or are you okay with it? I think those are...
Does it align with your users?
Right.
Right.
Like, okay, I've primarily serviced US-based users on the West Coast, right? In the Southwest, they feel and align a certain way. And on majority, like, can you start aligning personalities for these agents or filtering that information based on like geography and again all the other information that you have about that individual? So if I'm like a Texas transplant in Florida and I'm really like interested, I want a specific product that I miss from, whatever, San Antonio or Austin or something like that. And you ask like, hey, is this product, is there a product like this in my area? It's going to know. It's like there's no way that we're not getting to the point where all of the tracking pixels that we've been subject to over like however many years, and every time that we've gone through a loyalty program, that's not all going to make it into an effective like master profile for every individual that can then be leveraged for advertising and marketing purposes through all these systems. It's like, oh well, I'm just here to help you with your preferences. It's like, well, okay. Let's be clear here. I didn't need to go to Target today, but I did. And you told me that, hey, there's this sale. Amazon's been doing it in a less intelligent way with their Alexa devices, but hey, there's a product on sale. We noticed that you have purchased this product a number of times. Just wanted to let you know. Let me know if you want me to order it for you, right? Mm-hmm. And having that assistant in your pocket, you're like, oh, that was really convenient. But would you really have made that purchase in that moment? Would you have thought about it? Those kinds of other touch points that are available, because I think people will humanize the agents, and I know they are already. Some people treat them very much like an always available person. You have the audio now available through OpenAI, and 11 Labs is doing amazing things with their audio, their synthesized speech. And I mean, being able to do all of this from your pocket, at what point are they basically a person? Like, if you had a VA, a virtual assistant, would they be interacting in much the same way, and you'd build the same level of trust? It's just, a VA, they're a human that you're interacting with, hopefully, that you feel like you've got some kind of rapport, or a box that you operate in, versus another tool that can be iterated upon so quickly that model to model to model, week to week to week, they can make micro improvements and changes in the way that person is thinking, right, on the other side, that agent is thinking. So I'm curious to see where this takes us.
Man, there's a lot to unpack in that. I was thinking about something along the exact lines right before we started here, because I'm going to be in St. Louis for training next week, and I'm like, I need to book a hotel. Oh, wouldn't it be great if I could just, hey, agent, book my hotel for me near this location for this amount of money? But then I was like, but I think like some of me still wants the control over that. Like, I want to pick where I want to stay. I want to pick the room size, I mean, and an agent can be trained to do that. But what happens when the agent goes off track and then orders 6 hotel rooms or something, right? And now I'm accountable for that. Or it's like, this is the thinking I had, is like, well, are you going to have some final check on, do I authorize the purchase or not? Sure. And that's kind of what you were talking about, some like ruler slap that says, yep, that's what I intended, right? At some point. But man, there's just a lot of things to unpack with that, because everything becomes different once the AI actually is like that VA.
I've even thought, to a smaller extent, like the emails I get occasionally from people wanting to be on this pod, like it'd be cool to have somebody that could edit the pod, or somebody that could schedule everything. Like, it wouldn't be hard to inject a schedule into an agent and just say, hey, if somebody asks to be on, toss back this generic response and then find dates that work with them. And then throw out a calendar invite that works for everybody and adds everybody. Like that, it's not a crazy task. Could it go way off the rails? Sure. But that blowback or circumference is just like, maybe we don't talk to that individual again. And maybe that's not a huge deal. Especially, I was playing with NAN after you recommended it. And that seems like a cool tool that could probably do some sort of simple automation like that, of just find time that works with everybody, handle the back and forth. Because some people want to have very belabored back and forth, and some people are just like, yeah, let's book it, let's do it. And like, here I am scrolling 3 months out, like, okay, this sounds good, but like, will this actually happen? Or the case of, hey, this is coming up and we need to reschedule. That happened when we were supposed to talk, because I lost power at my house. Be like, hey, go tell the agent that like we can't meet and we need to reschedule, and then they could give a more like white glove experience of, hey, let's rebook, be immediately prompt. I don't have to think about it anymore. I just know, hey, Peter will be back on our schedule again, because we said go schedule that.
I know that whole process with, because some people just don't enjoy, and we see this across our customers. It depends on the really like the perspective of the individual. Some people are okay using Calendly or other booking tools. Other people want you to go back and forth, like you said, Alec. Like, they want that. I want to spend a half hour going back and forth about calendar dates and whatever else works, and tell you about my personal life that might be conflicting with this thing. But having an agent gives you the best of both worlds. You can have that interpersonal connection, or a more personal touch, but also be able to orchestrate the times and everything else in an effective manner. And to be fair, I feel that the structure around that doesn't even need to be agentic. It could just be prompts that are sent back and forth and referenced from other tools and supplied back as part of the prompt. There's a number of people that have brought up the use of, do we actually need an agent for this? Does it need to does it need to actually logic through this process, and on its own, or can we give it a box to operate? And one, it's less expensive to operate that workflow because you're using less tokens, but also you get more of the expected result because it's just less opportunity for the to misinterpret what's going on. But yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm totally thinking that way, is like, hey, can I build, when can I build and spend the time to get my little Telegram bot running so that I can just have it handle stuff for me? Like I can leave it audio messages and I can text it and have it update calendar appointments and add stuff to my like Notion to-do list or whatever it happens to be. And that's, it's all achievable, but it's like guaranteeing that outcome. And then at what point do you go back, you QA everything, you make sure it all works, right? It's an investment, but I think it gets you there. I'd be very interested to see if you guys do work through that process of implementing it to hear how it comes out.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, we're getting to be about time, Peter. Do you have any last-minute call-outs, or if people want to follow along on your journey of AI and how helping empower people, how can they follow along?
So I'm pretty easy to find online. Most of my usernames are at Vasilion, Vasilion, and I'll send you my contact information, Alec, but I'm P. Vasilion on LinkedIn as well. Realistically, if you're interested in learning more about what we've been working on, teams at Facet Interactive, and we're happy to have a conversation. I'm happy to have a conversation about AI, workflow, process, any of that stuff. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And I look forward to chatting with you guys in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, see everybody around. Bye, everybody.